we're here. It is
Ah,
so funny. The last time we all saw each other was like on a road.
On the side of a road where I meet everyone.
Just on the side of a road. You were
dude.
the only people that like pulled over to us the whole trip. No one
What?
came over by us.
I just remember like how much you were laughing at the time because of all your like you had all your bags like stuffed on the bike so that you
Oh
couldn't
yeah,
even like have room for your hands on the
get on the
handlebars.
bike. You know what I did? I got wider handlebars this year. And now
You
I
live
can
and you
actually
learn.
fit my hands.
I can't imagine bike packing. I haven't tried it yet.
Oh my gosh, I remember you guys had like fresh fruit and we had like nothing.
I think we were leaving like that pie place. I just
Oh
remember
yeah,
like we were in
yes.
like a very chipper mood, and then like we saw you, and you had like plastic bags on your feet, and you're like, "It's been raining for 8 days."
All right, welcome everyone to our interview with Kailey at the Cycling With Summit, which is a celebration of the bicycle and riders from all walks of life who are breaking down all kinds of barriers. My name is Annalisa, and I'm the founder and co-creator of Miles of Portraits, which is a magazine and a film about the people we meet as we ride our bikes around the world. Coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. And before I begin, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Ortlieb, Rad Power Bikes, and all of the other brands that have come together to make this summit possible. So a little bit of background on how we know Kailey. I had applied for the Lael Rides Alaska Women's Scholarship, which was put out by Lael Wilcox. And she's an endurance cyclist who is famous for winning the Trans Am a few years ago, as well as many other races. And she put together this women's scholarship to give a woman to ride 1,000 miles across Alaska. And I applied for it, and I ended up not getting it. But my riding partner Eric and I decided to just go anyway because, I had put out like all this planning into it, and I didn't want it to go to waste. So we ended up going to Alaska 2 years ago. And the winners of the scholarship were actually Kailey and her friend Brooke, who ended up riding across the state and collecting stories on climate change along the way and people who are affected by it in Alaska. And so, we were in Alaska at the same time biking in 2018. And as we meet a lot of people, we actually ended up meeting Kailey and Brooke like in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road in Alaska, because there's only so many roads in Alaska. So I feel like it's kind of bound to happen. But it was great to meet them and take their photo. And they continued on their journey all the way 1,000 miles up to the Arctic Ocean from the southern part of Alaska. And since then, Kailey has been on the cover of Bicycling magazine, and she's been using her platform as an activist to promote body size inclusivity. If you kind of take a look at the average cycling magazine and flip through it, you'll notice that in the advertisements and in the content, typically you see the kind of person who's thin and muscular. And what that does is it just closes off a lot of people. And Kailey is calling it out. With that, I wanted to welcome Kailey and ask you how you got into adventure cycling, and if you can tell us a little bit about the Alaska ride.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And we were saying it's so neat to reconnect after meeting each other on the road a few years ago. So, yeah, I got into adventure cycling kind of slowly. I started riding a bike after childhood again in college when I couldn't afford a car and I needed to get to work and get groceries. And then slowly realized it was something I liked to do for fun, and kind of had a community of friends who like to ride bikes too. And so I decided to try this ride across Iowa called Ragbri. It's a supported tour, and it's really fun if you ever have a chance. It's kind of like a rolling party across Iowa that happens each year. And I did that, and it was kind of fun. It was really hard and hot, and I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. There was a lot of like thin folks on road bikes, and I was a fat person on a really heavy steel bike. And when I got back from that trip, I didn't necessarily feel like a cyclist, but yeah, eventually I I sort of turned to dirt riding and riding on gravel as maybe a way to kind of get away from road riding a little bit, and met a whole new group of people and started to do these just really one night trips and then longer trips that were combinations of pavement and road, or pavement and gravel. And then I applied with a friend to get that Lael Rides Alaska scholarship, and we ended up receiving that scholarship and going to Alaska in 2018 and taking roads half pavement, so 500 miles of pavement and then 500 miles of gravel bike packing, to go from Seward to the Arctic Ocean, so sort of straight across Alaska. And yeah, I've kept going. You know, my trips have been smaller since then. That was kind of the biggest one yet, but definitely just in love with bike packing and gravel riding, but also with road riding and mountain biking. I really like anything on two wheels.
Cool. Yeah, I've, as someone who has only done bike touring, I've been really wanting to get into bike packing, just especially because you don't have to worry about like the cars and you can kind of go into nature more. So that's something that's definitely on my to-do list.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about a few months ago, you were putting on webinars with Marley Blonsky, who is an advocate in the same body size inclusivity space. And I was wondering if you could give us kind of like a summary on that Fat Bikers webinar that you did a few months ago, and just vocabulary that folks who are new to the topic may not know about.
Yeah. Yeah, so Marley and I put on a series of workshops, and we're hoping to do more, and hopefully in person we'll be able to do something in the next year or two with folks. But essentially we'd start the workshop by talking about the word fat. Both of us call ourselves fat, and that can be kind of a shocking thing for people. I think people think of the word fat and they think of negative things like lazy or unattractive. They've sort of prescribed these meanings to the word fat, but we are sort of, you know, in an effort that has been repeated across different movements, trying to reclaim this word that's been used as an insult, but really just describes our body size. And so one thing we share with people is, you know, feel free to identify yourself personally as fat if that's how you identify, but you know, be sensitive to the fact that that's not something everybody wants to identify as. And we use the language of people in larger bodies or people in smaller bodies. So staying away from words like overweight or obese that have been often used as sort of slurs against people in larger bodies and are often misinterpreted. Like I always say to people who use the word overweight, over what weight, you know? So just saying those words, you're sort of setting the idea that there's a correct weight to be and that this person is the wrong weight. So we talk about words like that, but I also want to make it known, like, this is really hard work. We all have bodies and we all have, you know, personal relationships to those bodies that at times have been positive and times have been negative. And so it's okay to get this wrong and it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and we're all just learning together. So these are new words for me too. Another thing we talk about is the spectrum, the fat spectrum. And so the idea that there's privilege in living in a smaller body, that our society has privileged that type of body, and there's systematic oppression that people face based on their body size that worsens as your body size increases. And so Marley and I always start by saying we are small fat, and there's a scale, and I'm happy to share some of those resources. And I wish I should have had the links prepared so I can just drop them in. But the Fat Lip podcast, which is a podcast by two fat people, they sort of have put together this fat spectrum, and based on clothing size and body size, you can figure out where you are on that spectrum and identify sort of some of the privileges that you might have based on the fact that, you know, I'm a small fat. I don't know what it's like to be in a large fat or larger body. So I can't speak to that. And I also have had a lot of privilege based on that. And so we go on from there. We talk about biking equipment and some of the limitations for people in larger bodies, clothing, And then we talk about culture and community building, and ways to make sure that our biking spaces are more inclusive for people in all size bodies.
That was a great intro. Thank you. Especially like about, I really appreciate the fact that you two are embracing the fact that you two call yourselves fat bikers as opposed to maybe like a more PC term, but
Sure.
also
Yeah.
like giving respect to people who maybe don't want to call themselves that. I was thinking about how like people use the word skinny a little bit more freely, and that's another reason why like there's nothing wrong with using the word fat.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you could kind of talk about why it's important that we emphasize that just because someone has a larger body who is biking, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to lose weight. Because I have a few friends who have completely had their life like transformed by the bike, and there are so many inspiring stories out there of people who have used the bike to lose like 200 pounds, and those stories are incredible and they're inspirational. But I think we should also remember that that's not necessarily like what everyone is trying to do.
Yeah, it's such an important question, because biking is a form of physical movement and exercise, and we often turn to exercise as a way to modify our bodies, either to make them smaller or stronger. And in reality, biking will probably modify your body in some way. I think that it's great to talk about stories of bikes transforming people's lives, and that sometimes is a physical transformation. But when that's the only way we talk about people in larger bodies approaching bikes as a source of transformation, that's when it becomes, to me, a bit problematic. For me, the act of doing physical activity to try to make my body smaller is not a positive way to come to biking. So I've tried that, been there, done that, I guess, where I've tried to approach cycling and other forms of physical activity as a way to change my body and make it smaller. And it's been an unhealthy way to approach sport. Whereas for me, if I approach biking as a source of joy, I might have an effect where my body becomes smaller, or it might not. But for me, it's a healthier way to approach it, because I'm doing it because I love to move my body. So I've said before, it's the difference between who has to move their body to fix it and who gets to move their body because they want to do it. And so I personally think if we promote the idea that everybody gets to do this because they like it, it's a more compelling story to speak to more people about trying to bike than if we talk about it as a form of exercise meant to change your body. And it invites people to be a cyclist right away. It doesn't say you have to be a cyclist for a while until you look a certain way and then you're really a biker. It says you're a biker on day one. And for me, that I like that a lot. But I do recognize, people approach biking for all sorts of reasons, and I'm not going to say one way is wrong or one way is right. This is just the way that I try to frame it that works for me, and I hope it works for some other people.
And that mindset really that causes all these microaggressions that people might have on you. Like if you're on a group ride and you're a little bit slower, like they might just assume that it's your first time. And there's all these microaggressions that you talk about. And in the webinar a few months ago, you were telling this hilarious, painful story about the time that you went to the supermarket to buy the bicycling cover that you were on the cover of. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I went to the grocery store and I knew my magazine would be out, and I wanted to buy the magazine with myself on the cover. I got a few copies in the mail, but I just thought it would be kind of a cool experience. So I went and picked it up, and I got a few other things and went to a checkout, and there was a young man checking me out, and he got my groceries scanned, and then he got to the bicycling magazine and he scanned it, and then he picked it up and looked at it, and he said, "Oh wow, I love mountain biking. Are you just getting into it?" And he was staring at a picture of me on the cover of Bicycling magazine, where I'm standing with a mountain bike on a mountain bike trail. And so I just kind of laughed and said, like, no, that's me on the cover. And he got sort of just shocked and was like, wow, that's so cool. And he didn't realize like that he had just asked me, oh, do you know anything about this thing? And I'm on the cover of the magazine. But that type of thing happens so often. And it makes for a funny story, especially because, yeah, I have been a biker for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily make for an inclusive community, because when I show up to group rides knowing that some guy is going to say, oh, is this your first time on a bike, or did you just get into it? Is this your first bike? Like, I'm going to have to say, no, and do a mental calculation of if I should kind of call that behavior out or just deal with it. So so those types of things. There's other types of sort of backhanded compliments I think people in larger bodies get when you're riding. People will, if they pass you on a hill, they'll say like, you've got this, or like, you're almost there, or like, way to get out there. I noticed them not saying those things to my friends in smaller bodies, regardless of how fast we're going. And I think those people are intending to be encouraging, and so that's great. And it, in some way, that does foster a sense of like, hey, we're out here together. But I try to push back and ask people, like, where's that comment coming from? If you're not making a compliment to everyone when you're biking that you see out there, why are you making that same remark to certain people? And who are you making those remarks to? And what assumptions are you making about a person that are sort of encouraging you to say those types of things?
Right. Yeah, that must like be so frustrating when it happens constantly.
That's the main thing. People always want me to tell them that someone yells like a slur at me or says some terrible thing, and that happens so less frequently than people shouting words of encouragement, which I guess it's a great thing, but in some subversive way, they're sort of saying a similar thing in kinder words.
How do you decide when to say something and when not to? I guess it's like a fine line of when you want to preserve your energy.
Yeah, I mean, when they're in a car or when they're passing you quickly on a bike, you don't usually have a lot of time to say anything because they're smoking you. But when I'm like in a group setting, on a group ride and we're all at a break, I will sometimes say something. Or if it's a close friend, I've had close friends say things similarly. And then I try to speak up because, again, as a smaller fat person, I have a lot more privilege and access than folks in larger bodies. So I do try to speak up, and I have, this platform to speak up. So I try to speak up as much as I can, but sometimes you just feel like you don't have the energy.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to like let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it takes a lot of energy, but it's totally worth it. Like if you think about what that cashier must have thought when you told him, like
I was happy. I was happy with my response then.
He'll probably remember that for the rest of his life,
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about just the way that kind of brands are portraying people in different kinds of bodies on their Instagram feeds and their marketing, especially after the Black Lives Matter movement. I just noticed that a lot of brands are having more racial diversity, which is amazing. Like that's such a great step. But something that I have noticed is that it's only really like when it's convenient to their image, and they'll only like kind of sprinkle in people with real bodies. And it just like seems like still like a token to me. And I'm wondering like if you have noticed a change in the past few years and what you think it will take to like truly have brands be inclusive.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about. I think we've probably all noticed, that there's been like a distinct change in who's being featured, and it's so powerful, and just I want to just keep seeing more of that. If I never see another, cis white guy on a road bike in a bike ad, it would be too soon. So I think that's great, but yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done. I found it interesting when I've personally been really fortunate to have some brands reach out to me and to have support from those brands, but then not to see myself in their materials or to see anyone that looks like me. So they want, like, I don't know, I've never spoken about this publicly, I guess, but it comes across to me that they want people to see their name associated with this, but not yet to show bodies that look like mine or people in larger bodies riding on their bike or wearing their clothes. I think it's changing. Like I'm really impressed by how much I'm seeing things change, and how many companies that we've spoken with about increasing their sizing options or increasing structural weight limits for their bikes or their components. I think companies are really trying, but there's still so much work. Like we're still only seeing certain body types and certain types of biking portrayed in these advertisements and in the media. So I don't think we're there yet, but I think, like, I don't think that means we need more pictures of me. I think, like, that means we need more pictures of all types of people doing all types of biking. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have as eloquent an answer for that. I think it's getting better, and I hope it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's getting better. It is crazy to think that you know more about this than I do, but just the weight limit of the typical touring bike or road bike it's not even that high. It's like 200.
No. Yeah, a lot of bikes, like carbon
More or
bikes, will
less.
be around 200. It depends on the material. Like a steel bike could have no published structural weight limit, but aluminum and carbon tend to have like 2 to 250, and that includes any gear. So if you're a cyclist in a larger body and then you want a bike pack or tour, you're pushing that limit perhaps already with the size of your body, and then any weight on top of that puts the structural sort of integrity of your bike frame at risk. And that's not to mention wheel weight limits, which are even lower. So there's a lot of work just in the physical equipment side of biking. And folks, I'm happy to say there are engineers working on this. There are some companies doing a great job. So like people are working on it. They know, over half of the US population is wearing plus size clothing. Like these folks want to ride bikes too. So I think it's just a matter of, like, for them, it's maybe dollars and cents. It makes sense to figure these things out.
Yeah. And it's so true that, like, seeing people like you out there, really, like, the phrase is so true. You can't be what you can't see. Like, it sounds cheesy, but it's just so true. Like, we even have proof in this. I think she's in this group, but Jade, who is our friend from the type 1 diabetes community, she saw you listed on the summit, like, as a speaker. Didn't even see you speak yet, but just the fact that she saw that someone out there, like a self-proclaimed fat biker, is out there, like, if she can do it, then Jade can do it. And so she went on her first bike ride in, like, so long.
That's awesome. For me, it's the same thing. Like I found people on Instagram that were, they weren't necessarily biking, but there were these groups of fat hikers and fat rock climbers, and just seeing people, like, proud of their bodies and proud of their ability to do whatever sport they like to do outside was, for me, it was like life-changing. That's the only reason I ever spoke out about these things myself, was seeing other people, and it makes me feel so much more confident when I go out biking to know that there's folks out there that are in larger bodies that are doing it too. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's so amazing what you do. Another question for you is about just like what you think individuals can do, or even just leaders in the cycling community, even like bike shops, because I feel like there's so many points in the cycling industry that are intimidating. Like, even when bike shops put on like group rides, the listing you talk about how the listing can be, like, intimidating, and in terms of, like, focusing more on speed than community. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, like, what as individuals we can do.
Yeah. I
be more
think,
inclusive.
bike shops can do a better job publishing more descriptive details of their group rides and then sticking to those things when they're out there. I can't say the number of times I've shown up to a ride that was published as like a 10-mile slow roll, and then they've taken a look at who arrived and what bikes were on, and they changed their mind. Now we're on a 40-mile gravel ride, and not prepared, not with the right snacks and that type of thing. Maybe there's a time and a place for that type of ride. But for me, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what fosters community for me. I think there's so many people that bike for so many reasons. So yeah, I think that's what bike shops can do. But what can we do as individuals, and what can folks in smaller bodies do? I think one thing is to use your privilege as a person in a smaller body to speak out for your friends in larger bodies, especially when they're in potentially dangerous or difficult situations. And so that might look like calling a bike shop ahead of time to make sure that they're going to have bikes that have the structural weight limit that your friend's going to be able to rent for the day, or that you support and you sort of outwardly support brands that have more size inclusive cycling like clothing options, and that type of sort of outward support for your friends in larger bodies is going to do wonders. Another thing, it was eye-opening to me in one of our workshops. We were talking about, if your friends in any size body are slower than you on a bike, what do you do then? Do you ride with them? Do you go ahead and ride ahead, but wait at appropriate distances for them to catch up? And I am like, I don't like to be alone, so I would love it if somebody would ride with me all day, even if that means they're kind of going slow for themselves. And it would be so cool if they would like wait for me very frequently so we could catch up and give me a chance to have a break and maybe a chat. But other folks in larger bodies said that wasn't going to work for them. Like, they wanted to just go at their own pace, and they did not want their friends to like slow down with them because that was just going to be too stressful for them. And so I think like what we learned from that is like, yeah, not all fat people are the same. No kidding. People are going to want different things. Not all people are the same. So just like ask your friends what they need from you on a ride is probably a good thing. Like, ask your riding partners what they need. And I hadn't done that really before, and it's really leads to some like internal angst if you're ever on a bike, especially a long bike ride with friends, months long bike ride, and you don't say what you need from your riding partner. It's like gonna have problems.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just communicating with your friends about what they need, and that goes beyond people in larger bodies, just to all people.
Yeah, especially like, I mean, I'm typically a slower cyclist, but when I'm like in a group, and I guess it's just like a few years ago, something that I noticed when I was like in groups is that like when you make it up a hill and you're one of the last ones, that people are like waiting for you, but then they take off when you arrive. So it's like, it just makes me feel like shit.
Yeah, that'll be a whole day. Like, I'm on a group ride and I never see anyone else, It's like, was I on a group ride? I should have just gone on my own route,
Yeah, cool. I have a few more questions for you. One of them is kind of like unrelated to this. If you could share one of your favorite type 2 fun memories. If anyone who doesn't know what type 2 fun is, that's something that was like miserable to look back on, but miserable at the time, but fun to look back on.
Yeah. I was thinking of this beforehand, and it might have been the day that we might have met you later that day, or I think it was later that day. We had this really epic day in Alaska. We had back-to-back like 80 and 90-mile days to get where we needed to go, and we were just like, that's like too big of a day for me to do once, and then doing like 3 in a row was just way too much. And we were on the last day of that, we were supposed to sleep in Denali that night, so in the national park, and we had to get there because there's not really like anywhere we could sleep in between, and it was like 85 miles, and it had just been raining for so many days. And the campsite we ended up sleeping at the night before was like no longer a campsite. It was completely abandoned. The bear boxes that you need to put your food in so you don't get like attacked by a bear were locked. And so we had to put our food in like the outhouse and try to lock it in there. And we had to, like, we did not sleep there very long because it was right off the highway. And we thought like, oh gosh, if anybody pulls in here, that's bad news. Like, we're in trouble. So we slept for like 3 hours and we ran out of water because we thought the campsite would have running water. And here we are in the pouring rain, out of water, needing to start biking 85 miles. We'd woken up at like 4 in the morning because we were too scared to sleep. And we could not find water, but we could hear like roaring rivers every like 100 feet. We'd go across a bridge with just like a bigger river than the Colorado River. But they were like 1,000 feet down this like, canyon. So we kept seeing all this water. It's pouring on us. There's rivers everywhere, but we had nothing to drink. We were totally out. And so we were like, well, what do we do? And we had our water filter and we ended up drinking out of puddles. We wrecked our water filter for like the rest of the trip too. We filled up all this water. Anyways, later that day we ran into you two having a very different day than us. And we still had like 15 miles to go, but we made it to our yurt that night. And it's a fun day to look back on, but it wasn't very fun at the time.
I think it's worth it for all the stories.
Yeah, worth
just
it.
Like the irony of being surrounded by water and not being able to drink.
Yeah.
But then you running into it's just funny to have that contrast because we were having a great day. Like we had just come back from like eating pie at this famous place next to Denali, and it was like a beautiful day.
You know what? I forgot to. We set our sights 80 miles in was this pancake restaurant that was in the guidebook milepost, which is usually super accurate for Alaska. And we got there and the restaurant had been closed for 2 years. That was like what we were counting on for food. So then we didn't have any food. Yeah, not a good day.
It was like the only place in that like radius to eat.
In like what's that? I don't know the name of that town. Anyways, when we got to Denali, there was like a lot of food there, so it was fine. But
that contrast reminds me of I don't know if he's in the chat, but Mike, who is our friend who we met in the middle of Kansas, he was on the Trans Am going the opposite direction. Like when we were going west, he was going east, and we met in this like fairgrounds campground in the small town in Kansas, and we had like the most amazing day because we had tailwinds and we were going like 25 miles an hour without even like pedaling. And then like he was coming the other way and he had covered like 3 miles that day.
Oh man.
makes me grateful.
Day. But when we ran into you, our spirits were lifted.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Maybe next time it will be reversed.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll just all be having a good time.
Yeah, hopefully. Cool. Well, my last question is just if you have a message for anyone in a larger body or not who's just on the fence, who has never tried adventure cycling or any kind of cycling, what your elevator pitch on adventure cycling would be to them and why you ride?
Yeah, I guess I'll just speak to adventure cycling. I think it can be intimidating because you think you need like a certain bike and all these bags, but really you could just put a backpack on and you could even drive your camping gear in for the night and just try a one-night ride. I would highly recommend it because it is just so fun to spend so much time in places that you usually just drive through, and you don't really get to spend all this time out on these gravel roads where nobody goes out there. People go out there people go out there to log. In some places there's gravel roads to access like oil wells, but nobody's out there just to like experience the scenery and spend time with their friends. And so I think that's the coolest thing, and I try to recommend folks just go like 5 miles in for your first time, set up camp, and then bike 5 miles out the next day. It doesn't need to be this huge thing, and these trips that are these huge epic things like riding across Alaska, that's cool, but I have I have just as great of memories from leaving from my house and going on a 1 or 2 night thing. So I think, yeah, trying to keep it realistic and small, and you don't need to buy all this extra stuff. So if people have questions about getting into bike packing or whatever, or they're, maybe have questions about body size stuff with bikes, I'm always happy to answer. I usually just folks message me on Instagram, and I try to get back as soon as I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kailey. I think we're gonna open it to Q&A. Eric, if there's anyone, I haven't
Yeah,
looked at the chat yet.
I've reached out to a few people. So one, thank you, Kailey, but I'll pass it over to, hopefully I'm saying everyone's name and pronouns correctly, but Jennifer had a question to ask you. So I will, there's the unmute button. Let her ask it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, Kailey. I actually, I hope you laugh. I'm actually doing this because of Marley, and that's how I found you, is because I've been following Marley for, I don't know how long. And then I saw this, and so that's why I'm here this weekend, and my girlfriend and I are planning how we're going to do our bike rides this weekend and stuff. So it's super nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Kind of fun. Yeah. My question for you is, I also am a little bit bigger, and I wonder what your gear is, mainly for road biking. I'm not a huge fan of dirt.
Sure.
Kind of a girl. And so I do road biking, and I wonder, you had talked about that you want to be supportive of brands and things that are that way. And so I'm wondering what your bike is, and I'm wondering about your gear. What companies do you support, and do you find useful for those of us in the larger sizes?
Well, my road bike, is my least fancy bike. And because I kind of just got into like road specific biking, but I ride at the Specialized Dolce. And the weight limit's right around capacity for me, really. I'm sort of hoping in the next year to get into a steel road bike that I just don't have to worry about the frame having any issues. And so I don't know if I have great recommendations for the frame specifically, but clothing wise, right now I'm a really big fan of Machines for Freedom, who just went up to a 3X, which I'm in the 3X in their sizing. And I think one of the challenges is like, I usually wear more of a 1 to 2X in clothing. So, for the sizing to say they go to 3X, but that's sort of the highest that, that only accommodates me. It means who doesn't it accommodate? And so I love it. It works really well for me. It is super compressing. So I think for me, when I first put it on, I thought I was going to like burst out of it. But now that I've had some rides in it, I see why folks really love it. It is expensive though. And the other brands that work well for me have been Pearl iZUMi, which also only goes to 3XL, but theirs I think accommodates a true 3XL in my experience. And then Terry, when it goes up to 2 or 3X, works for me. I wear I usually wear pretty thin cameos, and I try to advocate to people that like you don't need the thickest padding and you don't need the most padded bike saddle, although I'm sure it sounds like you already know that. But I think folks in larger bodies tend to think like I need the widest and cushiest saddle and I need the cushiest padded shorts, and that's like not always the case. And for me, it's really not. So I like that, but I usually just wear a t-shirt when I ride too and not a jersey. So I'm really just in it for the shorts. But I would love to talk. I'd love to talk more about gear with you though too, especially as I'm getting more into road cycling, and hopefully we can go on a road ride sometime.
Yeah, I'm in California, so I'm not near you guys, which is kind of a bummer. But if you're ever down here, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And
That's
oh
awesome.
my God, I would love it if you ever come down here. Look me up.
That'd be so cool. Yeah, hopefully we can. That'd be so fun.
Thank you. Oh, Terry Bicycles. I saw the note in the chat. Terry, but you're talking about Terry bikes?
Yes. Yep. They're shorts. Yep. I usually wear bibs. And I guess one thing I'll add is like I always wore bibs because I figured for me, I carry a lot of my weight in my stomach, and I thought my shorts would fall down. But I ended up being forced into a situation where I got a hole in the butt of my bike shorts on a bike packing trip, so I had to buy whatever REI I had, which was a pair of Terry shorts, and I thought, like, this is not going to work, but I really love them. So if you're into like multi-day trips or longer rides where you're going to have to go to the bathroom a lot, I would recommend the Terry shorts to folks 3X or smaller. If you are in a size bigger than a 3X, R Sports is who I usually recommend, because they go up to a 6XL, and they're a triathlon brand.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for that, Kailey and Jennifer. Raina, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, I was wondering, community is very important. That's how I met Annalisa and Eric, through the diabetic community, and Jade. But how did you find other people in your community?
Yeah, it's been mostly online, and for a while now, Marley and I have been sort of just doing work together. We met on Instagram. She was the first person I ever saw that looked like me that was riding bikes. And so we just connected that way. But since then, some folks, not Marley and I, put together a Facebook group called Fat Bottom Girls. That's like a body size inclusivity Facebook bicycling group. And so that's a cool resource. I've seen folks are always posting like, hey, what do you use for handlebars? What do you like for a saddle on there? So a lot of equipment sharing and a lot of support for each other. Like, I just went on this ride, and people kind of hype people up. I think in cycling, we haven't seen what we've seen in other industries. Like, we haven't seen unlikely hikers, the biking equivalent of that. And maybe, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. For me, I haven't had the time to dedicate to making a group that's as substantial as that. And maybe somebody else can do that. But I found a lot of community through the WTF Bike Explorers. That's sort of the way I've connected. They're a group of people that are doing a lot of progressive work and trying to push the bicycling industry and the bicycling community to be more inclusive in a number of ways. And so I really have connected that way, but I live in a small town. I'm not in a big city. So all of my connections in cycling are usually virtual. So I'd love recommendations for how to meet cool people to bike with in person. I usually just bike with like 2 friends here, but it'd be cool to live in a city like Portland or Seattle where there's like that community exists on and offline. Thanks for putting all these links in, Eric. That's great.
Live customer support. Yeah, and at the end of the summit, we will have all the interviews recorded, but hopefully we'll probably reach out to all the speakers and just make it clear so people can find, and also give people like Kailey time to think and add more and whatnot, which is awesome.
Great.
Kailey, I'll look through the chat, but maybe could you talk about, so like I've, interestingly, like bike touring was kind of my big leap into the cycling world. It's kind of one of those things where like previously there was nothing that really like drew my interest. And then all of a sudden, through adventure cycling, you start bike touring, and I'm like, oh, this is a really cool pace because it's slow, but you also get to see things. And I was wondering, like, in those transitions for you, because you've kind of explored different things, like, do you find something different in each group, or like, do you find something easier now as you transition from one to the other, or,
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I am like a jack of all trades, I guess. I think there's something fun to be found in each type of biking. I love like classic touring because I think it's a really cool way to travel, and bike packing just gets you to these like remote places you couldn't get to otherwise. Mountain biking's been the new thing for me this year. And it's so fun. It's like riding a roller coaster, but like higher risk probably because you could really mess up. in all of them, I think, you know, what carries over is like, I like to move my body this way. I think that's what brings us all to this. And so the movement is really similar in each discipline, at least on the uphills. And then the movement's probably really different on the downhill if it's mountain biking. But I love the movement. I love riding different types of bikes and seeing how they feel, you know. I've been so lucky now that I have a few different types of bikes, and so I get to see which ones, you know, you get on a road bike and you just feel like you're going as fast as a car, and then on your mountain bike you can make these crazy turns. And I think yeah, kind of, you know, there's things that draw me to each one, but there's also things that carry over, and a lot of that is just spending time with friends outside is really, like, that's really what it's about for me. I'm, you know, like 100% extroverted, so so I kind of need the time outside to speak with friends and just pedal. So yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna close it there unless there's any other questions that people have. Kailey, where can people find you on it?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I will type it because it's my last name, so it's a mouthful. And also the word sauce.
Yeah, I always have to like, I can never spell your name out. I have to always like copy paste it.
I know, I should change. Someone was like, you need to change your Instagram
You need to
name.
shorten it.
But I'm just sticking with it. Yeah, that's where I mostly post. You know, I have a Twitter and a Facebook, but I'm mostly on Instagram like everybody else, it seems. So that's the best place to connect with me. I'm usually really good at answering my messages, and if I don't respond to you, like, just message me again. It will be fine. I won't be like annoyed or something. It's because I didn't see it if I didn't respond. So
Cool. Thank you so much, Kailey. It was great to see you after the last time we saw you was on the side of the road in Alaska.
so great to see you. Thank you all, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you all for watching. And the next interview will actually be in a few hours at 8 p.m. EST, Eastern Time. And Eric, who has type 1 diabetes, will be interviewing Abby Brow, who also has type 1 diabetes. So that should be a great talk. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Oh, all the gifts have been amazing. This is like, I am gonna write them the best review ever. I love this bag. I am wearing it like a Gen Z person, like across the front of me. Have you?
It has so many uses.
Oh my gosh, I look so hip. And they sent the bandana. It's so
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like did this whole thing. I put on this outfit to go to the grocery store because it was the only time I left my house in like 2 weeks, and I was like, I better look cool. Then all the
2020.
this is my only outing.